so it's not just a gore fest, and it's not just about how much blood we can throw at the screen. It's about telling a good story and creating interesting characters that the fans seem to like and seem to respond to, and I think that's why this franchise has stayed successful for so long.
And so the idea of Saw literally came about out of necessity. We wanted to make a movie with our own hard-earned cash, with our own money, and so we came up with a story about two guys trapped in one room.
We had no idea it would end up making $100 million on opening weekend and spawn the most successful horror franchise in cinema history.
Ah, good old Saw, one of the most infamous and high-engrossing horror franchises of all time. I started watching these at uni, and I got hooked from that first film, becoming a bigger Jigsaw junkie than Amanda. A year and a half ago now, when I started scripting this video, I got COVID. I was practically in bed all the time, so fuck it. Why not rewatch one of my favourite film franchises? To me, Saw is pretty much a mix of great films, guilty pleasures, and a couple of shit ones. But it has a charm that hasn't been replicated by any other film series for me. I love series that live in their own logic and head, similar to like Kingdom Hearts or my Fever Nightmares. The twisted logic of Jigsaw is pretty fun to see, storylines are sometimes genuinely great, and the behind the scenes footage, especially the traps, are really interesting. Now I can finally build my own trap that forces my friends to watch some goddamn ergo prop. The first Saw film is brilliant on its own and is a deserved classic. Even if you don't like horror films at all, I implore you to give it a chance. It's more of a thriller at heart, really. It's not gory outside of one or two short scenes. It has an excellent story, some really good writing most of the time, and the way they shot it on a small budget is really well done. I think the original trilogy of 1 through 3 are a perfect complete story that is worth your time if you can handle some gore. I'm ranking all the films from worst to best, and to warn you, these summaries are more spoiled than cheese left out of a fridge. So if you haven't watched any of these films, watch them, pussy. Or at least watch the first film, and if you want to see more, try the first trilogy. Gore, violence, and cringe warning from here. Let's do a quick summary of the series. Saw is about this villain called Jigsaw. They're what we like to call in England a nasty pasty. Due to losing their child from a miscarriage caused by a couple of druggers in inoperable cancer, they try to drive off a cliff, but they didn't slam enough on the gas, putting their own body through a test of survival. The irony being their body could survive a crash despite the cancer killing them slowly. They decided everyone should go through these kind of tests to show their will to live, but I suppose they ran out of cars and cliffs to use, so elaborate torture devices it is. These kind of tests range from 2 people locked in a room who need to get out, to a house where they need to hunt for something, or a gauntlet of tests that teaches one person a lesson. The original Jigsaw character has a hypocritical philosophy that almost makes sense just because of how big a presence they have on screen. It's something I really like. They're not just targeting criminals. Jigsaw targets those who don't appreciate their life. Jigsaw knows their clock is ticking, while some people do nothing good with their life. I generally feel it makes Jigsaw more interesting as they believe they're helping people, but we can see the true results of their crimes. Jigsaw essentially starts a cult of personality over time, trying to show others how they see the world and follow in their footsteps. Jigsaw's actor does a great job of selling this role, and really it's the reason that the series has carried on as long as it has.
Greetings and welcome. I trust that you are all wondering where you are. I can assure you that while your location is not important, what these walls offer for you is important. Salvation, if you earn it.
Alright, enough summarizations. Let's shit on the worst films. All films are judged with a burger model. We got good stuff, bad stuff, good stuff. Though some of the good stuff for this first film on the list is going to be a real challenge. Let's look at this bottom bitch. Winky face.
And so one of the things that happens in franchise, and I think it did happen in Saw a little bit, is you owe so much to telling an audience where we've come, and we felt like every time you're explaining something that's happened in a prior film, you're dying.
And I think that there were 8 other films after that.
by the very end, you know, we were retreading a lot of the same water.
What the hell happened to Dr. Gordon? And
That is far and away the biggest question people have asked us over the last 6 years. So we were like, let's give it to him. Let's start with it. Show them that he's still alive. He crawled out of the bathroom so they can stop thinking about it.
Hey Riders, you know that two-part film you plan to finish the franchise with? Yeah, we have quite a bit to do, so yeah, cool. So hey, can you just, like, squish them into one film for me? We're not $100 million film franchise anymore, so... Sir, with all respect, what the fuck? Saw motherfucking 7, to the surprise of few Saw fans. What a shit fest this one is.
So we've got the creators of this whole shebang-a-banger right here.
Blame us for this.
You can blame us for this whole mess.
This was supposed to be the final film back in 2010, but they came back years ago to pretend it never happened. That's what I tell myself anyway.
Had to take this story that was supposed to span 2 movies and then suddenly put it into 1. Our initial plan was to do it back to back, so because it's 3D and so it's more complicated and longer, so just shoot 2 movies. But we just did 1, and that was the end of it.
It follows,
in this case, a horrible cunt,
who was put through a gauntlet of traps, big shocker I know, for faking being a Jigsaw victim, while the Jigsaw successor Hoffman puts the only cops who could be bothered pursuing a guy who could turn them into Swiss cheese through a cat and mouse game. Fun fact, this is the only film I skipped rewatching when ill. I just looked at Saw 7 and thought,
I don't think so.
Helicopter!
oh fuck, what am I even gonna say about this bit? There's the Chester Bennington cameo, that's pretty fun, with great dialogue like, oh fuck! And other classics. Also, I like the way Bobby is shown in the scenes before he is captured, as a charlatan for Jigsaw survivors. It's an interesting premise on paper that is mostly wasted. I also like the Jigsaw survivor support group idea. They must have been the ones to benefit from the bake sale. Okay, enough stalling, onto the...
And ultimately, I think it was one of you looked and said, who's going to care what the story is? They're just going to care about the blood coming down. And, I
Alright, finally I can shit on this film. So, the first negative with this really is that it ruins the plot of every film before it, and it's the only story in the series that has bored me to death. Even the bad stories weren't like this bad. Hoffman, who began to lose his personality over Saw 6, has finally turned full cheesy supervillain. Garth Ennis would love this boring twat. It's made even worse by the fact that literally all characters I had still cared about were killed last film, and the new characters have all the excitement of one-player bingo. It's shit too because Saw 6 would have been a great ending. Just kill Jigsaw instead of having him survive. It felt like they wanted or planned to but didn't go through with it. Hoffman had a great hurrah in Saw 6, but in this film he becomes an unstoppable super beast in the worst possible way. Like he was a genius the whole time and not a fucking scrub who left audio evidence of a crime scene. Speaking of bad characters, let's look at our main character, shall we? Bobby is such a fucking prick in this film, and it honestly feels unwarranted. You want to personally go to his girlfriend and apologise for his shit look.
No! Why would you just shut the fuck up?
Likewise, Bob. He's clearly not supposed to be this hateable, but he's not made a single good decision in his life. He also has the worst kidnapping scene in the franchise, if that goes for anything. Every other film, it's a creative tense sequence, but nah, boring car park is enough. Alright, next point. Now, I'm not someone who needs much gore in their traps, but damn, the traps are so freaking lame in this film. Worse yet, they're both the most uninspired and the most nonsensical at the same time. How do you do both? The traps jumped the shark bad. The obvious culprit is the silencer trap. You're telling me this decibel reader only judges loud noises from her, but not from this dumbass going shh? I do have some suspension of disbelief, but this bullshit is suspending me from my trousers and expecting me not to notice I've left the ground. There's also the See No Evil trap where Billy does his Kool-Aid impression. Oh yeah! That's the only good part of the trap. Man, I'm not even halfway done with this dumb bullshit. The last trap is actually kinda clever and is going into the next good segment as an idea, but the execution is awful.
Joyce, I gotta tell you something. I haven't saved anyone all day, so
It's not looking good to me.
it ain't looking good.
So his poor wife had no idea he faked being a victim of Jigsaw, yet in his last in a long string of fuck-ups, it's his wife that loses her life in a horrible way, not him. I criticise the series for having always had the protagonist normally die by the end of a film, but this walking dartboard gets to go free. On paper, I don't have a problem with her being killed as an innocent person, because the series has done that plenty of times before, that people forget. But it's the fact that she was never shown to not appreciate her life, so why was she the one to die exactly? Who knows? Speaking of Bobby and traps, he had the interview where he falsely claimed to be a survivor of a jigsaw trap. We see this scene in the film but cut down, and you can tell pretty easily that he faked being a survivor because the series loves to show the torture scenes. In the extended scenes of the DVD extras, there is a longer version of the scene, and it shows some visuals of Bobby doing the test, adding a little bit credibility to his story and making it more interesting. They definitely should have used that version, even if the dialogue was edited down a little bit.
We languished on this sequence here because what we originally filmed was, as Bobby was talking, we actually cut to an abridged version, a very clean, sterilized version of him, of showing what he was actually talking about. And again, Oren, I think, one, it wasn't kind of working for timing, but you were very adamant that we kind of stick to what had worked so well and what the fans really liked, which is not cheat the audience. We knew we were going to be doing a little bit with the fake dream sequence, and you were adamant that we kind of not do that here, that everything that people saw, on a Saw movie actually was happening, and I think it worked to the better of the film.
The opening trap of this film is garbage. It's so stupid it's almost funny, but never makes me laugh either. The idea of a public execution, especially since it's shown to be before Hoffman, is completely fucking stupid. The whole love triangle thing is dumb, a very basic human thing that doesn't deserve death. She doesn't deserve to die even though she's a cheating arsehole. The two guys is just as weird. I'd love to hear Jigsaw's justification for their kidnapping on their tapes, because even compared to every other innocent person he's killed, this one seems even harder to justify.
I want to play a game. You are both beta cooks, soy-bred pasties. You must become the alpha, or both become giga chads. Either way, there will be two of you making out tonight. Live or die. Make your choice.
Now this may get groans or be too political, but I don't give a fuck. This film feels so fucking misogynistic, it's unbelievable. Especially the horrible beatdown of Jill by Hoffman, him calling her a stupid fucking cunt as he beats her head in.
There's, two reverse bear traps. Oh, did he just kick her in the...
Well, it is...
She kicked her in the Gideon right there.
Ouch.
So,
It's the same with how cruelly the innocent victim of Bobby's wife, Joyce, is burned to death in a brazen bull for doing nothing. These scenes are side by side too. There's also the way Gibson calls Jill crazy again and again, the way in which he says it particularly.
No, you're crazy. You know that? I knew you were crazy the minute I laid eyes on you. Crazy. Okay, this is what we're gonna do. Crazy.
Then you get Bobby's...
Why would you just shut the fuck up?
I might get pushback for this opinion, but the other films just don't seem that way, so it really stands out to me. Very uncomfortable to watch, honestly. Alright, one negative point left, but this is a big one. The assassination of Gordon's character. I don't know if this was a directing choice, acting choice, whatever. It was hot garbage.
When Carrie actually stands up and starts to speak, Carrie forgot what he sounded like. This was actually his first speaking sequence in this film, and so luckily I had brought along Saw 1 on DVD, and I popped it in so he could listen to himself, so he could get his cadence down for the accent for Dr. Gordon, because it's very different than what he was initially going for. And like a true actor, he listened, he nodded his head, he listened, and then he spouted it perfectly.
Terrible agony, or you'd be dead by now. Salute you, Mr. Dagan.
In the first film, he was a great, sympathetic, but somewhat flawed and layered character who was assumed dead, and that would have been fine, but nope. How about we give him the depth of a Saturday morning cartoon villain? Nice of them to give a writing staff the rest of the day off. They brought him back, and for what?
Promotional DVD.
That's gotta be like one of the worst scenes in film history.
Chocolate mousse. I can't talk too long. I gotta poo.
Wow, this introduction of Gordon really has me in suspense. I wonder if we'll see him again.
But was Dr. Gordon a victim or a player? Dr. Gordon is part of this whole game. I'm willing to bet my life on it.
Oh wow, Gordon's the final apprentice. No fucking way, bro. Wow. Truly life-altering. Who could have seen this coming? He seemed like such a nice guy. So it seemed like they planned for Saw 8 after to expand on Gordon and give more time to him. But in execution, it was barely shoehorned in the last 5 minutes of the most predictable twist. What a waste of film and talent that was.
We all had the idea that we're going to do a 2-part series, Final Chapter Part 1 and Part 2. And so what was different about this movie was that this one was in 3D, so we started shooting several months earlier. So we actually started writing this movie long before 6 had even come out. And when 6 came out and didn't do as well as everyone had hoped, we were forced to put everything into one movie.
Here's a genuine idea. The plot twist with Gordon could have been fine. Could have been good, really. Just do 2 simple things. 1, remove any scene other than the last one from the film so it's not blatantly obvious. And 2, don't announce the actor's gonna be in the film before it comes out. If it did that, the scene would have been at least, like, good fan service and been exciting. Okay, I lied, there's one more bad point. The biggest sin this film commits.
Your name, sir?
John.
Tobin, you look like a teenager. Your shoes, you got on these, like, skateboarding. Are those DCs?
I am a teenager.
Okay, back to good, I guess. Well, the terrible dialogue is funny at least. Definitely a good quote machine. So, for one final good point, getting to see the reverse bear trap actually go off for the first time was really satisfying, especially being used on one of the most annoying characters of the series. I mean, Jill was fine in Saw 4 with the drama-like scenes where there's only a few of them, and she was fantastic in Saw 3 where there was no dialogue, definitely the biggest Jill highlight. Also, Duran Gray's Hage Hisato Kodamune no Nakade Karamitsu Ita Shakunetsu no Yami being on the soundtrack is metal as fuck. For each film I'm gonna do my top 2 traps and the worst trap. So for this one, the best trap was the teeth trap. It's the most grounded and understandable pain in a trap for a good while, and it is so hard to watch. It also turns out it has very interesting origins for the idea.
This is he has to pull out his teeth, and this is something that, you know, the idea was planted in a poster for 3, and then we tried to originally do in part 4. So in part 4, Rig, you know, he wakes up in his apartment, and you know he's all messed up and he's bleeding out of his mouth, and then at the end, I think at the end it was to get into that final room where Matthews is. He had to pull out his teeth. It all came full circle. But we couldn't figure out how to do it, how to shoot it really effectively, and so it got put off, and so this one.
For second place, it would have to be like the Powerhouse trap. This one is like more over the top and silly, but I love Chester Bennington being in it, and the music kicks ass.
I think we shot that in 2 days, didn't we, Tony?
And it was cold.
In the rain, in a junkyard.
Which is why the Saw movies were always done in the studio.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
For worst trap, it's the silence trap. What was that shit? It's completely illogical, full of stupid dialogue and acting, and yeah, there's just not a lot to say about it. That's good.
That was probably the most visceral thing in the entire movie.
That was my favorite trap in the movie.
Finally, Saw 7 is over. So now the films get good, right? Right?
It's great because Kevin knows sort of the rhythm of Saw. I really hope that they never try to make a Saw movie without him in the driver or co-pilot seat, because he's one of the core elements for sure.
is where the entire film started, with Chris saying, what would it be like if I was handcuffed in a bathroom?
Chris was a fan of Saw.
Yep.
He always said that he would love to see Saw, but with the joke. Just a joke.
He pitched it to someone over at Lionsgate. Pete and I were having lunch one day, and out of the blue got a phone call from Mark and Norton saying, Chris Rock wants to do a Saw movie. Figure it out.
This would probably be the most different director's cut, just because there's so much great content that didn't make the movie, just from a pacing standpoint.
Spiral from the Book of Saw. This is the only film on the list I hadn't seen before, so it was nice to have something new to experience. The film's concept excited me, and this seemed like it could be a fresh spin-off, but it's honestly held back by the series it's attached to, and the acting in the film doesn't help either. Thanks, VA is easier than acting Chris Rock. I love how you play exactly one character your whole career. You truly are a gift. In this film, Chris Rock plays Chris Rock as a policeman chasing down a jigsaw copycat killer who specifically targets the police. I'm sure with this star power, this film will do great at the... Oh my god. That's real. Well, shit.
I asked him why he did this movie, and I go, why would you do a Saw movie? He goes, if there's an interesting death, he goes, I'll do it. And he's like, this was an interesting death. I was like, all right.
The concept and opening was pretty promising in this film. It looked like it would be doing its own thing. I also loved that the voice and the puppet the copycat uses gave a feeling of a pathetic copycat, and I was fully on board with the idea of a jigsaw actually capable of human errors and more of an obsessive follower. I bet this will hold up well by the end of the film and not be a massive disappointment. Also, the first scene with Chris Rock, which Chris had written, is a great scene. However, it all goes to fucking shit as soon as we enter the police office. Speaking of police, the concept of a police corruption message was kind of a cool idea. It certainly was building to that, but the execution, well...
I'm blown away. You've got people like Chris Rock, Samuel L. Jackson in a Saw film.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel when you see this?
It's bizarre. I'm strangely detached from it, whilst also thinking, wait, because I sat in a room when I was still living with my parents and wrote a movie, Chris Rock has now devoted 6 months of his life.
Yeah.
He was like, you wrote Saw? And I was like, yeah, I did. And he's like, I love Saw. And he's like, I want to write a Saw film one day. And I thought it was just one of those things you say in conversation. You know, if you're talking to a juggler, you're like, I've always wanted to juggle. You don't mean it. You hate jugglers. You actively hate them, but you're talking to a juggler. You're trying to find a connection. Turns out he wasn't bullshitting. He really did want to write a Saw film.
None of the cops in this film have any real character. Every damn cop uses the most cliche dialogue that even the cheesiest of cop dramas would cancel themselves over. For example, this.
It's a jigsaw copycat, so that's where we gotta concentrate our focus.
Sure, Fitch, but I want you to stick with hard evidence. You do an undercover op. You don't clear it. There's no coordination. We are homicide. But you're robbing drug dealers in a fucking hotel.
What are you guys doing here? Oh, we thought you boys might need some backup. Fuck you, Fitch. It's not your case.
Or this.
Boss, let me see that gun over there. The one on the left. Yeah, come on. On behalf of the Metro Police, I want to thank you for your generosity. Knew I should have never let him become a cop.
This is Detective Banks requesting backup.
I'm on Decker Street. Request backup.
Fuck him.
In pursuit.
You're too close to this thing, Zeke!
Rooftop. And you saw it, with your own eyes. And you can positively ID this cop.
He's had his foot on the neck of this community for way too long. We can't have this. I'll testify, Officer Dunleavy. I'll do it.
Personally, this really muddles the message because I don't see it as real corruption and applicable to real life when these cops are cartoonishly corrupt. They even committed to the truly original trope of a cop needing a new partner, but they're asked to work with a rookie.
From now on, you're gonna learn to be a team player. You're getting a partner.
I'm not babysitting some fucking rook!
Yes, you are!
And they want to work alone. Wow. Take notes, Hollywood. I'm literally 5, and what is this?
You are off, on your own, as usual. No backup, nothing.
No backup, because there's nobody on the force I can fucking trust!
Saw 2 did police corruption so much more subtly and did it pretty well. And in that film, the corruption becomes more apparent on subsequent watches. As for the twists of this film, they are total garbage.
To me,
It was obvious 20 minutes in who it was, and their motivation was stupid. Basically, his dad was killed by a cop who was gonna cover it up, but expert VA Chris Rock brought the cop to justice, so all cops are bad. The villain offers Zebra Man a chance to team up, seeing him as the only good cop, though it gets turned down so he ruins Samuel L. Jackson's life. That's the plot, honest. I don't see how he decides from this single moment all cops are bad. Sure, that cop was bad and pretty corrupt and they saw their dad get shot by him, but Chris Rocky helped him, so instead of deciding something like some cops are bad or most cops are bad, it's literally all cops are bad except this one.
Some of you guys think I'm a rat. Some of you think I'm a snitch.
Hey, yo, we fucking got 6ix9ine here, yo! Hey, I'm a rat. I ain't no snitch.
Hell, all cops are bad would have been a more sensible conclusion for him to make as a child, like even Chris Rock's character.
So Max and I did a lot of discussing about where he came from, what his background is, and I pray there is a sequel because I think that he is fucking fascinating with what he's kind of put together for who he is.
Yeah.
And I think if there is a sequel and you kind of see where that goes, it is pretty outstanding.
Also in regards to this shit villain, remember how I said I liked the idea of the pathetic sounding puppet and imitation showing a more flawed Jigsaw? Nope, we have another super genius over here. He's working on a higher brainwave just like Jigsaw.
Hello, Detective Fitch.
So yeah, the voice. The voice went through 500 different iterations. I didn't want it to sound like Jigsaw at all. We tried Max's voice. It didn't work. It didn't go through this. We tried the same treatment as Jigsaw's. It just didn't sound right. I wanted it like a kid's voice. I thought would have been very scary. That didn't work. We tried. We literally had probably went through 500 different voices before we settled on this one. The final day of the mix.
Like, what was even their motive for being a Jigsaw copycat anyway? What threw them over the edge to resort to these methods? Though the cult of Jigsaw is, like, told about and exists in this universe, he never even mentions Jigsaw by name. Like, why the hell did this person bother going through the crazy effort of setting all these traps up if he wasn't a fanatic or something? Like, maybe it's a well-kept secret that Jigsaw's traps are less efficient than something like, traditional murder, maybe? And the villain has no intention of making the traps escapable, so it seemed pretty pointless just to make it a Saw film.
The reason we changed kind of the color palette is to differentiate it from Saw. We still wanted to have the same vibe, the same energy, but we wanted people to know it's not a Saw movie. That's why we shot outside, that's why we shot daylight, that's why we shot different colors, different filters.
There's still more. Did this villain have an engineering degree like Jigsaw did? The traps feel pretty elaborate, and unlike every other apprentice, they had no opportunity to learn from the original Jigsaw. So how did they figure out how to build this without nothing going wrong?
Countless exposition monologues were paid to talking about how he was able to do what he was able to do, and that's his engineering background.
And when we started this one, we made a conscious choice to try to go back more towards basics.
The new Jigsaw killer, the new killer in this film, he's not an engineer. So the first thing we had to decide is, how are we going to design these traps? What are they going to be? How are they going to look?
Back more towards basics.
This shit was so mind-numbing generally. If you're gonna have any form of character, maybe give more than the last 10 minutes to develop them, instead of just making it a poor excuse for a twist that's barely a twist. Let's move on to the pacing of the film. It's pretty bad, and it's mainly down to debatably the film's biggest problem. This film doesn't feel like it wants to be a Saw film. Obviously, it didn't have to stick to the Saw formula. Hell, I wanted it to be a lot more different than that, to try something new. But they clearly didn't know how to splice in the traps naturally. It just feels like they're taken from a different film entirely, and it would be better if it wasn't any traps at all. The combo of cop drama, horror, and long trap sequences makes the film feel bloated, unfocused, and just kills any and all momentum. On top of that, the traps are way too brutal to introduce someone into the series, so they should have toned them down quite a bit. You want to tickle their balls, not break their balls.
I'm out.
Again, a much longer scene that a lot of it was cut out. It just didn't work.
And that character had a much bigger role.
So, yeah, so that character originally had a very intense death that we shot. And at the very end of the movie, we decided it was too much and we cut it out. I think that's part of what it was, is that we were trying to go for a more commercial approach. And that death was so graphic and so horrific that I think that it was so mean-spirited towards the end of the movie, we had to cut it.
Oh, that's just gross.
Oh, yeah, the MPA had a problem with this as well. You saw a lot
gee, I
more-
wonder why.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Darren Lynn Bousman now. So Darren Lynn Bousman is the director of this film. He also directed 2, 3, and 4, and he is a great director in a lot of respects. And one of his key things that he does in his films is he has crazy transition shots. Like, we're going to go through them when we get to those films, but his transitions are incredible. But in this film, they just completely cut them out.
So a lot of you are probably wondering about the transitions. Many of you have asked me about the transitions or the transitions of this movie. They were shot. There was a transition right there that ended up not making, and none of the transitions made the movie. They were shot. Numerous reasons they were cut. I felt that when we actually saw some of them, it felt too showy in a movie that was not the original Saw films. You know, I was so excited in Saw 2, 3, and 4 to be able to do those. And so coming back here, they felt gimmicky.
And they cut everything, and it feels like it's lost his directing voice out of his control, and I find that really sucks. I also have to mention Kevin Grubert, the editor for all of the films he hasn't directed. His style of editing is what makes Saw. You know, that's his style, and you can feel the lack of presence of his editing on this film. Without Kevin, and with Darren's style watered down and commercialized, the film just loses so much. The last bad point I have to mention is that the acting in this film is pretty mixed bag. Even like Samuel L. Jackson, the legend, is phoning this shit in and he looks ready to hang up any second. He has the enthusiasm of Drake Bell at his court casting couch. Okay, let's go back to trying to get some positives out. So one positive is that even though Darren had all his transition shots cut, what is left uncut of his continuous shots are really good. Another plus is the music in this film. So as always, it's done by the great Charlie Clouser. All the tracks in this film are good. Like Pellates is another good piece. So last good point. The final trap is absolutely incredible, with a marionette that Samuel L. Jackson is tied to, so that when Chris Rock thinks he's freeing his dad, making that choice, in the end it allows Jigsaw to literally control him like a puppet, which there's a scene with a puppet that makes for a great comparison and a great finale, honestly. That almost makes me forget how much the villain sucks. So, good job on that.
You fools! You let him get away! You let him get away! You ingrates! You ingrates! It's time to go back home!
Okay, going on to the traps. So, the best trap was the marionette trap, as I mentioned before.
There he is.
There's some Darren Bousman gothic visuals.
It was kind of late in the game that we had this idea of the marionette. And, you know, one of the things that is very hard as the closer you get to production is to sway opinions. And the puppet was originally not a part of it. And I just loved this idea at the very end that Samuel Jackson becomes the puppet, that he is the marionette. And more importantly, that the marionette, the first time you see it when it raises the gun up and goes, pew, pew, that would be Samuel Jackson's last finale shot. I think he was originally in a swimming pool.
Yeah, he was in a swimming pool, and the final trap was a rat in a pipe eats through his neck and comes out his mouth.
Yeah.
The second place is the tongue trap, the first one. That's partly because of the music, but it's also a pretty brutal idea. Even though it doesn't make any sense, I've given it a little bit of suspension of disbelief. It's just barely from pushing me out. The thing I like about it is that the first scene is great. This trap really sets expectations high from the start of the film.
right here, this is all forced perspective. So this here is just a painting. So this set actually stops right about here, and all of this in here is just forced perspective. What that means is it's like old dark rides in carnivals. We painted it to look three-dimensional. So if you were standing here, your entire body, you'd have to be ducking down to stand there because you'd be hitting the top of your head. We only built one side of the tunnel, which means we're doing what's called French reverse here, which means every time you see behind him, it's the same thing that's in front of him. We would just turn his body around and shoot. So we only built one side of the tunnel. So that tunnel that's all behind him right there is the same tunnel that you're about to see right here when his eyes look. So when you see this wide shot, that's the same tunnel.
The worst trap was the glass shard trap. Honestly, I like the concept of it, but there are a few ways you could try and stop the trap. And Chris Rock's poor acting at times just makes the scene so much worse. Alright, we've just made it through total garbage, so now it's time for...
What makes these movies better than your average horror film, man? They're smart. They've got a
Well,
lot of thought behind them.
I think that at this point with the Saw films, we obsess over the story and obsess over every single thing because, you know, knock on wood, we've not jumped the shark yet. My mentality when I approach a movie is kill everybody, which I did in Saw 2 and 3. And they didn't give me that luxury on this one because I keep fucking up their franchise by killing all their characters. It's also hard this year going into a movie that Lee did not write.
We learned a lesson in Saw 4 that if you hold back the information till the end, you run the risk of people not quite being able to piece it together.
Partially garbage. I would describe 4 as a beautiful mess. I really enjoy this film and parts of it makes me want it higher, but after killing off their main villain, I think the road to something new came with complications. The screenplay for the first 3 films was written by Leigh Whannell, who alongside James Wan invented the concept for Saw, though Saw 2 story was written by Darren and Leigh basically polished and Sawified it. Leigh and James clearly intended Saw 3 to be the end, and what a great end it would have been, but
we've got to have money.
So now meet screenwriters Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan, the writers for 4 through 7. Personally, their writing flops between great and awful like Makoto from School Days Between Girls, and equally off-the-rails endings. For Saw 4 only, Thomas Fenton was also on the story for this one. This time around, after Jigsaw is dead, they find a tape in the autopsy announcing the games will continue post-mortem. Then we find Officer Rigg from the last 2 films in a deadly gauntlet, where he tests others and is tested, with his mission to save Hoffman and Eric Matthews.
Why are you still alive?
This film is a great showcase of the Saw formula from here on, and why the later films became so flawed. This film invented some of the tropes for the rest of the series, for better and for worse. And the film's writing feels like it's working on a binary switch. Great scene, awful scene, great scene, awful scene. It's like a coin flip. For this film, we're gonna play a fun game show. Who is the new Jigsaw Killer?
Those who don't appreciate life do not deserve life.
Feel free to play at home, guys. Over the course of this segment, we will highlight possible subjects and figure it out at the end. Not that it will be blatantly obvious. Now on to the... The autopsy scene was brilliant, with really strong sound design. It's also a bold choice to confirm for any deniers in the audience that Jigsaw is truly dead and gone.
The interesting things about this scene is this scene was going to be at the end of Saw 3 at one point, and we made a decision to not have it at the end of Saw 3 and open it with Saw 4, and I think it turned out to be such a fantastic opening for this movie.
Another good thing to mention is the see what I see setup. I think it's excellent and only wish it was more prevalent towards the end of the film. So Rigg, our protag, he's an officer who gets kidnapped by, wait for it, it's Jigsaw.
Not only did he want to be shirtless, he wanted to get wet. And so we kind of tailored this scene just for him.
His trials are a bit different. He was shown earlier to be an officer who acts on impulse instead of listening to what others say. And it can get him into trouble.
You know never to go through an unsecured door, ever.
So Jigsaw kidnaps Eric, Matthews and Hoffman, and if he makes the wrong decision, Eric's head goes for these other victims of Jigsaw he comes across. Jigsaw gives advice that would help the man out, and then it's up to him if he actually does what he's told. Feel how I feel, save how I save. These messages with each trial are done to show that, unlike other Saw Pro tags, Rig isn't made to do these trials just to appreciate his life. He's being recruited. He's essentially being indoctrinated into becoming a Jigsaw accomplice and understanding Jigsaw. I think this concept is fantastic and would fit perfectly with the cult mentality Jigsaw creates. Sadly, this film drops the ball hard towards the end, but it's great for most of the film and had such potential. One thing I appreciate about this film is that they use a pre-existing character as the protagonist, so they have some connection to the general story. After Leigh Whannell killed off every character people cared about, it's surprising they scraped together anyone at all, though saying that, who gives a fuck about Rig? The dude is pretty boring in the previous films, but I guess the options were Jeff and they seem to have no interest in him anymore. As for the ending of the film, a lot of it goes into the good category later, but there's one part that sucks, and to find out, let's complete our little game show.
Then tell me who did it! Tell me the killer's name! The dog? Uh-huh. And how'd he do that? What the hell? Are you screwing with me?
Can you believe it, studio audience? It was Hoffman the whole time.
Who? What? It's Johnson Smith, the CEO at the beginning of the movie. Remember? Oh yeah. Okay. Bet you didn't expect him to be the bad guy.
What's his name again?
Johnson Smith.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's really cool.
As you can tell, I find this very underwhelming since we don't care about his character. He had one scene in Saw 3, and he doesn't even really make an impression in this film. It's a pretty lame part of the ending. And second, so that dropping the ball thing. The journey of Rig was done to indoctrinate him, but he doesn't learn anyway and dies at the end. And according to the director, the indoctrination plot was essentially dropped to keep the film more simple.
Jigsaw was basically teaching Rig how to be Jigsaw. Do this, do this, do this. But we felt, again, we wanted to simplify the story, so we removed that whole thread out of this.
So Rig dies for...
You know never to go through an unsecured door, ever.
And his own journey becomes pretty pointless outside of showing the new villain. There was an ending that was filmed that was not allowed, and it would have contradicted Saw 3 establishing that Jigsaw's games do not work. But as a standalone ending, it would have been a lot better for the film, honestly.
Original ending was this. We've seen and saw time and time again where people fail at their test. What if someone succeeded? What if Rig did not open the door? What if he actually learned from his lesson, learned that the only way to save Detective Matthews was not to open the door? So I thought of this idea as we were shooting the movie is, what if he gets to the door and doesn't open it? And so we shot a version of the movie where the door...
Well, we didn't quite shoot
We shot
that
part of it.
Because if that version was shot, trust me, it would have been on the screen.
Rig got to the door and didn't open it. He fell to the ground and broke down.
Well, fell to the ground simply because he witnesses
Detective
Matthews' head splatter, which would be like crushing, because for the last year, basically 6 months, he's been searching for his friend, only to find him to watch him die.
Yeah, basically knowing that if Detective Matthews doesn't save himself, he can't save him.
And if I try to save him, I'm gonna end up, dead. So he has to watch him die, and he does.
So what was going to happen was going to be that to still keep it that Saw fuck you kind of ending, he would have seen Detective Matthews die. He stays there, does not open the door. Hoffman stands up, comes outside, leans down, whispers something to Rig. Rig kind of just blown away. His jaw drops. Remember the jaw drop? The jaw drops. He watches Detective Hoffman walk away. And he stands up and
then
begins.
we cut back to the hallway with Strom and Jeff.
And Strom's running around, and eventually Lieutenant Rig turns a corner, and Strom's there, sees Rig with his gun, and shoots Rig. Bam, 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 and then Rig falls down. But we decided all around that this ending was more of a Saw ending right here.
I don't know who's we, but I had nothing to do with this ending.
There are two things that could have been done with Rig that would have made this ending far better and more meaningful. So, scenario 1, have Rig survive and learn from the test and become a prominent accomplice to Hoffman, becoming his apprentice and being a Jigsaw duo. Scenario 2, Rig becomes the next Jigsaw. When he comes to save Hoffman, he sees the police corruption around him and how many criminals go on free and untested, and he allows Detective Hoffman and Detective Matthews to die, seen as Jigsaw saw. Jigsaw put his dying trust in him, and Jigsaw, being the omnipotent being he becomes later, knows this will succeed. Rig runs the show from here on. It feels wrong to say that, but even Saw 2 the video game actually ended up doing this, but without the build-up, so they both suck. With the planning of Saw 4 and the delivery of Saw 2 the game, they could have made one great whole. So to move on, the whole unsecured door thing is so stupid. I think it's less of a moral lesson and more of an ego trip for Hoffman, which to be fair, kind of fits his character. As Rig's superior, he probably felt slighted by Rig's disregard for authority and wanted to make an example of him. So Rig is shown to have an obsession with saving people and hangs on to every single case, even if saving everyone isn't possible. This includes obsessing over Eric Matthews, who has been missing for a long time, and believing he is still alive. This is the obsession Jigsaw claims to be addressing. Wow, they've never done that before. Poor Eric. The actor didn't want to come back for 4, and 4 his character was killed in 3. But the thing is, Rig is right about Eric Matthews the whole time. His gut was correct, and he was still out there. Plus, obsession with saving people is at least part of some law enforcement jobs, don't you think? Obviously, he needed to cool it a bit for his health, but who needs expensive therapy when you have expensive death traps? I think focusing on his indoctrination instead would have been a much better focus. Last point on Rig. The intended message is apparently to teach Rig not everyone can be saved. This contradicts Jigsaw's beliefs. He gave a person who ruined his legacy and became a murderer in his eyes a huge second chance, and has the line, "Everyone deserves a second chance," in the following film. This message makes even less sense. According to commentary, Darren tried to keep the point that Jigsaw's message wasn't to say not to save them, but to not intervene further when making people save themselves through the traps. But it felt like this message got lost in the mix, but it's also just a convoluted and nonsensical message anyway. Alright, enough about Rig, let's talk about other bad little bits about the film. So, for example, the opening trap is kind of boring, goes on too long, and only exists to have art blank, exists for later. And on the twist, though I like the twist quite a bit, killing Jeff was so fucking stupid. I mean, they had him survive at the end of 3, and instead of saving him for Saw 5 or whatever to save his daughter, they just kill him with 0 fucks. For my final point, the biggest negative for me that might piss people off, Jigsaw's belief and personality being retconned, plus their backstory having fluff added to it. Jigsaw gets a deeper background into their character in this film. In the second film they got a good amount of backstory and how it began, which was enough really. In this film they try to flesh out the backstory by contradicting the other films at worst, and convoluting them at best. If I pretend that Saw 2's backstory didn't exist, this backstory would be fine and has some good aspects, but gives them different motivations for starting, now being the loss of their child. I think this change was made to make them more sympathetic. but I don't feel like it was necessary. But the biggest is that this is where the kinds of people Jigsaw kidnaps changes. In the original trilogy, Jigsaw did not capture criminals and bad people exclusively. They targeted people who didn't appreciate their life. The protagonists of Saw 1, for example. One didn't appreciate his family, and one was a PI who did nothing meaningful with his life. Saw 2 was a hard-ass father who didn't appreciate his son. Then in Saw 3, it was a guy whose family fell apart due to wanting vengeance on his son's killer. From here on, every damn character has to be a criminal or bad person in some way, and that's just not Jigsaw's MO. It never was that way. Is Rig not appreciating his life? I guess, with him being too into work to spend time and moving with his girlfriend. But what about Art Blake? Hell, Eric passed his test and wasn't finished off by Amanda. I think he's learned his lesson, guys. Saw 5 and on are even worse at following his belief. The people there seem to be appreciating their life plenty, but they are just pretty bad people. Overall, there's one word to describe the quality of this movie.
Fart. Oh, do my dad. This is for the DVD. All right.
What are we saying?
Justin, tell them about your time and tenure here at Saw 4.
Are you kidding? I just did a 4-hour interview with this guy.
Oh, great.
I'm done. It's all there for you.
Excellent. Well, it's
I
all
wanna
there.
know. Yeah, it's all there.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Fantastic. So much love.
Turn it over.
Very good, Alvin. Nice, you finally made it work. Now, for your next magic trick, you're gonna finish the day's work.
All right. That will be pulling something out of my ass.
Okay, let's talk about more positives. So, Strom is introduced into this film, and though I think he actually becomes a decent character in the next film, in this one he's okay, but it's more the actor that's great in it. He's very physical and really gets into it, and especially when it gets to the more dramatic scenes he's in, he absolutely steals the show. So another positives is some of the traps. So in Rig's test, the first part of the test is fine, but the second one is really good. So he basically has to kidnap this serial rapist. It's a very good way to justify in Rig's mind that, you know, following as Jigsaw wants to do is fine, because he sees, you know, these pictures of this guy's crimes, and it kind of emotionally pushes him to do as Jigsaw wants. The trap here is just brutal, like the limbs being torn apart. Is great practical effects, and just a great scene in general. It comes apart like string cheese. So the third test is also really good in this film. It's quite inventive, because Rig arrives and the test is already concluded, which is quite unique. The wife basically had to free herself quite literally from her abusive husband, since the things that appeared for them both went through his major arteries, but allow her to survive. That was a really good scene as well. So for some other positives, there's good stuff to talk about with Jigsaw and Jill. So there's quite a bit of good wordless acting between Jill and Jigsaw in this film after the miscarriage. There's also really good flashbacks with Jigsaw, like with Seesaw, where he was put in a brutal trap but he took a stab at it, and the stuff with the workshop is really good as well. Jill's acting is like still decent in this film, but it, you know, as we know, it doesn't last for long, but oh well. The credits of the film, it was really nice to hear X Japan do their original song Fall for this film. It kicks ass. Sadly, much of the other licensed music in this series, it is pitched up a little bit and sped up, so that's a shame.
People probably won't place it yet, but they're, you know, these hallways are leading to familiar hallways for those people who have seen Saw 3, and that box with the red velvet is a very small clue that it's similar to the box that Jeff was looking at in Saw 3.
Kept the mystery about Jigsaw in the air very well. Jigsaw died in Saw 3. How is there a Saw 4? Who's Jigsaw now? And that leads into a very controversial part of the film I personally love. The twist. Too many Saw films have the same stupid twist. Hey, you know this one character? They're also an accomplice of Jigsaw. This film does have that too with Hoffman at the end, but that's not the good twist of the film. The good twist is that this film takes place during the same time as Saw 3.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
When I saw my motherfucker Jeff walking at a supersonic speed, I was loving it. I saw what they did there and thought it was a pretty cool twist. Sadly, they do the Apprentice twist again with a worse Saw character, but let's pretend that part doesn't exist yet. I do at least like that with a Hoffman area. The Hello Zepp extra melody is added to the music, which I associate loosely with Hoffman. My last positive about the film is the transitions. So, as I mentioned in Spiral, Darren does great transitions. These ones are a little over the top, but they're really ambitious and they look great.
The princess came in from Officer Rick.
So, onto the traps. So, the best trap was the rapist trap. It was pretty satisfying. I loved the red lighting that they used in the scene, and the end was brutal. My runner-up is the spike trap with the couple, just presented very uniquely. The worst was the mausoleum trap, the first one. I like the actual setting of the mausoleum, but the trap itself is very pointless and kind of only done to retain the gimmick of opening the films with a trap. From here onward, my enjoyment of the series will continue to go up and up. Like, we're going from films I would consider not very good films into average. So the film I would consider the most average but still like decent for this series is this one.
We're now in an age where the horror film cycles back, the zombie film goes away for a little bit, and then it couldn't be bigger now with Walking Dead and whatnot. And this type of horror will come back too. Maybe in a few years, that desire again will return to have the philosopher John Kramer instill some new life lessons upon folks.
We all really decided to try to bring this more towards Saw 1 and not towards the Saw 2, 3, 4 contests between Eli Roth and Darren Bousman to see who could outgross each other. But we really wanted to kind of go back to Saw 1, a little more logic and a little less gore.
We thought we have the chance to start fresh. We want to kind of have the essence of Saw and some of the characters of Saw, and yet at the same time we're doing it for a new audience.
7 years after this franchise ended, we suddenly had news of a new film coming out. I was very excited to see this film as I finished the series about a year before this got announced, and the filming style looked modern. At points this film felt like the breath of fresh air the series needed, but at other times that breath reeks. Saw 8 getting jiggy with it kept its identity under wraps. Was it continuing Saw canon? A reboot? Maybe a soft reboot, alternate universe or spin-off? No one really knew, and it was part of the film's mystery before it even started. Saw from the very beginning had a unique identity that made it stand out, so there was good reason people were excited for a new one. Some disliked this generic Hollywood stylistic change while others welcomed it. For me, it's a film that I really liked on first watch, but falls from grace the more I watched it. In this film, it's been 10 years since Jigsaw's death and the murders have stopped. All of a sudden, more victims have shown up. It seems a new game is going on, and John Kramer may still be alive and pulling the strings. Is John Kramer having his Jason Lives moment as a serial killer, or has he stayed down? First off, these posters, I think they're brilliant. They're so striking and stand out well. It's kind of a shame the cult of Jigsaw is barely touched upon, as this poster would be perfect if it had. Speaking of nice visuals, this film looks pretty nice, has a modern touch while keeping some of the Saw feel. I especially liked the opening shot, and I liked about half of the scene transitions this time. The intro scene is really great, though it threw me off on my first watch. The Saw series had never really done a non-slasher action scene before, and this scene is straight up a police chase. There's a pretty sweet action sequence and all, shows that it's going to be a little different from the others. It sets a good tone for the film, and the situation with the shooting is used in a clever way later in the film, not once but twice. I also have quite a lot of good stuff to say about the main test. It does the Saw 2 and 5 thing of having multiple people take part in the game and needing to work together to survive, but there's some really great traps in this one, though there's a couple of forgettable ones as well. I love what they do with the chain in games 1 and 2. In game 1, the chain will keep pulling the 5 of them towards the saw blades until they give a small sacrifice of blood. This opens the door to a larger area, but they stay on the chains which pulls them through until one of them activates a nearby tape. From there, the second game begins with the syringes, and after some time I think the chain will reach its end on the ceiling and strangle them. What I like about this is that it feels like it's a continued element through the gauntlet that the other films lack really. I think it's simple but effective and adds urgency to even the downtime where they're finding out who the drug thief is and about the clue of how much a human life is worth to them.
$3.53. I need about $3.50.
Chains is better than a boring ass time limit we're accustomed to. The last game of the gauntlet is pretty fantastic too. A one-on-one personal battle over taking the gun that has a hidden element to Jigsaw's words.
Is your key to freedom.
It's a pretty great scene overall, and Tobin Bell as Jigsaw absolutely sells the scene. He's better than ever. And also, the true sins of the people in the gauntlet being sprinkled over time is done pretty well, and they give good variety to them. Shame that the characters in the gauntlet are pretty...
The real question for all you Saw fans is, what's the purpose here? And like, if Ryan doesn't step there and his leg doesn't get caught and he doesn't find this thing by trying to get out, how do they ever get in the silo room? And the answer is, ask Josh and Pete. They screwed that part up. We never understood it, but it works really well.
Jeez, are the characters overall pretty boring in this one. They have bare minimum characterization, even though you spend more time with them than in the other two ensemble casts. Even when the backstories of their crimes are kind of interesting, the characters range from forgettable to unbearable. The comedic relief is unfunny enough to be an Avengers level threat.
I confess that this is fucked up!
The quips from the characters in this one are straight out of a Marvel film, just with more swearing. It's a shame as the quips between the police are kind of funny. Feels like different riders despite there being only 2 riders total. The humour in Saw best fit in Saw 4 with a journalist, but here everything feels like a trailer line, or, oh haha, that's what I was thinking as an audience member kind of line.
No, it's not creepy at all.
As standard for Saw, very few sympathetic characters actively in the games who you care about living or dying, but this one is particularly bad. In the others, I can think of at least one sympathetic or compelling character per gauntlet. This one has none, other than modern Jigsaw, but he doesn't speak. Also, speaking of the game, what the fuck is with the HD TVs for an event that, after the twist, is confirmed to have taken place 10 years ago, before Saw 1? You could argue this is just to hide the twist, which would be pretty cheap, but even if it is modern day, CRTs are part of Jigsaw's style. It wouldn't be strange for him to still use those in the future. You can still buy or fix CRTs. Surely buying 1 or 2 of these wouldn't have broken the budget. It might seem silly to some people that it took me out of a film, but the HD TVs are just such a drastic oversight. There's no plot excuse for it either. Even if they used old TVs, it wouldn't give away that it happened in the past, as that's just Jigsaw's style and wouldn't have made the twist impossible to figure out. Another huge plot hole is how the fuck Jigsaw knew half these crimes had even happened. Through the series, there are a few times where Jigsaw knowing about a crime that isn't public record is questionable, but this film turns suspension of disbelief to 11. How did they know Halloran mislabeled their X-ray? How did Jigsaw know that the drunk car man got his friends killed through recklessness? How did they know who that person actually was when there was no known witnesses? Jigsaw's omnipotence has never been so high. They even know exactly what they will do in the farm. And as for the new Jigsaw, though I like his character overall, I have 3 main complaints. 1, his acting is generally okay as a villain, a bit cheesy, but his first line,
I am him. What?
is cringeworthy, both for script and delivery. Second, an apprentice before every other one is pretty stupid by itself. Just make it an alternative universal reboot at that point. And third, yet another detective apprentice. It's pretty boring. We just got rid of Hoffman, so here would be my pitch for the villain. So, a common complaint with Jigsaw is how all-knowing he is and how he knows what all these people did that even the police don't seem to know. So why not have the first ever apprentice be a PI? That would make a lot more sense.
Only one! Only one! Only one! Only one! Only one! Only one! Okay, alright, so I guess just anyone can use these things now. Yeah, whatever, I don't care.
Originally I had this film at my number 5 spot, but I realised a big problem with it that I hadn't really thought about before. But it's not to do with the film itself. It's that, unlike what is the new number 5, where the goal of the film was to continue the series, this film tried to bring in a new audience into Saw, but it completely failed by relying on continuity once again, and not really being standalone or comprehensible by itself.
We have an entirely new cast in this film. It is a new storyline, and there's definitely some new twists and turns that people haven't seen before.
It wouldn't have been necessary if you'd simply played by the rules. But you don't like rules, do you?
I liked that the film touched a bit on the concept of a cult of personality Jigsaw would inspire in the future, but even 10 years later he is worshipped in a sense. It only gives a small glimpse through the fan site and Eleanor's obsession with collecting his previously used traps, but I think it's a nice touch. Another positive is the villain is a lot more likeable than, say, Hoffman, and definitely the Spiral villain. He has a bit of sympathy and understandability to him. Though his plan is a little convoluted to say the least, and there are some minor conflicting details, he overall does well as a replacement for Jigsaw. He even has some pretty great interactions and chemistry with Eleanor and Halloran. Lastly, the sequence with Halloran and Jigsaw at the end is unbelievably good. One of the best Saw climaxes. The satisfaction of Halloran showing his true colours by pressing Jigsaw's button was great, and I loved the fake lasers with blood packets. It left me very satisfied by the end and got me excited what they would do with a new Jigsaw in Saw 9. Whoops. Best trap would be the shotgun dual trap, sold by the acting and intimacy of it, plus a great concept. The needle trap is second place and could have been first, honestly, if the characters weren't so goddamn stupid and actually got themselves killed after they said the solution out loud. There are no outright bad traps, but the worst is the grain silo trap because of the stupid music stings and the cheap scares. I like the leg wire section though.
And this was a scene that really kind of kept building as we were going through it. You know, we would start out and we just said, oh, they'll go into this room and they'll get locked in this circular room. And then we were like, well, there's not really anything there. And I remember when we started, it was going to be water, wasn't it? And then when we decided we were like, we've done kind of the water with Scott Patterson before. And then we decided it would be ants or maggots. And then somebody said, well, didn't we kind of do that once with something else? So we went with the grain, and then really at the very last minute, we said, well, there's grain, but is it really elevated enough for a Saw movie? So somebody came up with the bright idea of dropping really sharp implements on them, which seemed like it was more random, but great visual for the movie. So we went with it anyway.
If you look at sequels, most sequels drop off by 60%, 50% from the one prior to it, and Saw continues to succeed. I think why is because we have a lot of people around that care. I'm excited to see what they come up with 5.
Yep, that'll be interesting to see what actually comes out of that. All the luck in the world, you know. I hope it works out for them.
So how do you continue the story when people think they've seen everything that can possibly be in a Saw movie already?
I don't. The writers do. Luckily, I'm so glad I don't have to think about that.
The director of Saw 5 is David Hackle. He was the scenic designer for Saw 2, 3, and 4. David was very responsible for the traps in those films. He was very involved with the director in designing them. I think he saved some of his most twisted creations for the film that he himself was going to direct.
I would consider Saw 5 a pretty good film, definitely above average. I hate boring films, and if this film was just pure boring average, it would be like bottom of the list or near the bottom. But it has some really good stuff to it. The main reason it's above 4 and Jigsaw is that it doesn't totally fuck up its potential and good plot points by the end. If Saw 4 was too obsessed with flashiness to actually be coherent, Saw 5 is more like your standard 2.5-star horror film on Netflix, far from anything special or objectively good, but aims to tell a simple story and do it competently. After Saw 4 confused the fuck out of lots of people and lost interest in the series, Saw 4 seemed to want to go back to basics, but still fails to stand on its own.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
This film has a new director, as shown here.
Where's my chance gone? She's a better director than I am. That's rough.
I mean David Hackle, the production designer of Saw 2, 3 and 4. Something I love about this series is how they give long-running staff these opportunities to try an ambitious role and bring a fresh perspective to the series. Though honestly, I like his directing style the least, as there's nothing stand out about it, but this was his first director credit. Of course he hasn't had any time to find his voice, so, you know, it gave him a good chance to try that out. So I'm curious to see how his style might have evolved in his later films. Okay, let's go into the plot of Saw 5. So this time, 5 people are trapped in a gauntlet where they need to compete to survive the challenges, and that they all have something that ties them all together. Meanwhile, the new Jigsaw, Hoffman, has a slip up through some dying words that puts him in the crosshairs of Strom, possibly blowing his cover as a detective. The simplicity is honestly one of the biggest strengths of this film. If it didn't require knowledge of the Saw canon to really get what's going on, this would be a decent recommendation of a film to someone who's never seen Saw. Though the beginning of the film stumbles a little bit, the pacing after that is really good. The Strom vs Hoffman scenes are well presented, and the story is clear, and it doesn't even require previous films to follow, unlike the messiness of Saw 4. There's some pretty great traps this time around. This installment went back to roots and focused less on gore for a while and goes more for creativity, emotional weight and theming. It's a very welcome change that, of course, Saw 7 came back to ruin. The water cube, the pendulum trap, the pints of blood trap, the bath trap, the final trap, there's just so many great ones in this film. And the twist of the film actually adds to the effectiveness. Speaking of the water cube trap, afterwards you see Jeff and Lynn's daughter from the third film get rescued. Like, imagine how traumatized for life you would be if you realise your mum and dad was killed by Jigsaw and the man who saved you is the new Jigsaw. So, a positive of this film, I love the flashbacks in this film. A lot better than the previous film that convoluted the backstory. This just gave a little bit more context to older films, and the scenes were fun, especially the one with Hoffman. There's only one real exception that I'll mention in the bad section. For the test this time around,
we'll take a closer look at one of the most bizarre twists in this case, the disappearance of 5 seemingly unrelated individuals.
The main cast are pretty good, very selfish people but actually have real interest to them. The main gauntlet they endure, the reveal of their connection to one another, and the twist that they never even had to get each other killed, but the purpose was to cooperate, all worked really well together to make an interesting journey. And the characters are decent. Similar to Saw 2, nowhere near as good, but still decent. So let's go into a little bit of the bad of a film. This film is somewhat forgettable. So there's not a lot that happens in this film compared to the other films. That's in part due to the convolution of the other films, but this almost feels like the equivalent of a Naruto filler arc, but less fart jokes. Another negative of this film is there is one transition to the past that is so ridiculous and annoying. So I understand wanting smooth transitions between your scenes, but generally you want to make it clear to your audience when a flashback is happening or not. So there's a flashback where Hoffman goes through a door in the present, and then it looks like he just travelled, but it's actually in the past. It's got the same clothes. The only point you can really tell it's in the past is when Jigsaw is suddenly alive. There might be a colour change, but Saw's always been experimental with its choice of colour. Also, the scene just sucks. Like, before he actually sees Jigsaw, there's just a bunch of fake jump scares, and I hate that shit.
Christ! Come on, Pee-wee! Come on!
Something else that kind of sucks about this film is this is the first one where you can feel the lack of Jigsaw's presence, and it does make the film feel a lot more empty. In some ways, Saw 4 went overboard the other way, where the film was so much about the now dead Jigsaw that the main plot missed its own point by the end. So this film was made to be the true beginning of Hoffman as the new Jigsaw. But due to the plot of the film, he doesn't really get much time to really show what kind of Jigsaw he would be and why he's worthy of being the villain from here on. This series really jumped the shark and just kept flying higher. Hopefully Saw X actually takes place in space like the greatest horror film of all time, Jason X.
Hey, you want a beer?
Or do you want to smoke some pot?
Or we can have premarital sex.
So, to speak about Hoffman, though he is pretty good in this film, I don't like Hoffman at all as the new Jigsaw. I think the actor does a great job, and he seems really nice and charming off set, but the character just does nothing for me.
You know, I'd love to actually do a horror movie with Anthony Hopkins because he was so fantastic in Silence of the Lambs, and I'd like to do something with Tobin Bell again. Maybe I could be against those two and we'd see who'd win. I think they would.
But in this scene with Jigsaw and Hoffman, where Jigsaw has tied him up and he tells Hoffman,
emotionally there can be nothing there. It can never be personal.
It's an awful line in an otherwise fantastic scene. Even with Jigsaw at his most deluded, I refuse to believe he wouldn't find any of his victims personal, since many relate to him or the clinic he worked at. The line ages terribly too, because in the very next film, they have the game which is shown to be the most personal Jigsaw has ever done.
To me. To me.
To you.
To me.
To you then.
There's also another part to Jigsaw in this film that I find ridiculous, is that I made the joke earlier about Jigsaw being omniscient and how he knows everything, but in the start of this film, Strom finds the tape from Jigsaw talking about how he is dead and the game will continue. But if Jeff had passed his test and Jigsaw was still alive for those few moments before Strom comes in, it'd look pretty fucking dumb when he finds this tape that's like, oh, I'm definitely dead, whoops. So let's talk about the main test now. So I'm going to talk a lot more in the good section in a moment, but the one negative I have to say about it is that it is so disconnected from the rest of the plot, like the Strom and Hoffman cat and mouse game. This just has nothing to do with it, and the only other one that backs are a lot better in this film than the previous one. There's one flashback in here that makes Saw 4 even more unbelievable. So Hoffman speaks with Jigsaw right before Lynn shows up from Saw 3, but the games are supposed to be simultaneous, right? So how the hell did Hoffman get time to set up all of that final room of Saw 4, including tying himself up and setting up Eric Matthews? before everyone else wakes up or is put there. I guess it must have been another accomplice, another one, but it makes Saw 4 seem even more ridiculous. I'd assumed Saw 4's final room was set and ready to go quite a bit before Saw 3's trap was ready to begin, but now it no longer makes sense. And the last bad point is the poster's tagline is, "You won't believe how it ends."
Wait! You won't believe. You won't believe? Won't believe? That doesn't mean anything.
There's so much wrong with this to me. One, what a lazy and cliched tagline. It says nothing about the theme or story or of the film, and it doesn't sell it at all. And two, the ending is pretty good, but is not a "I can't believe this is happening" kind of ending like some of the other Saw endings are. And three, I can't prove this, but the tagline seems to imply this might be the last movie to tie it all up. Like, you won't believe how the series ends. But of course they aren't done with Saw yet. Positives, though I criticised that transition into the past earlier, this film has one of my favourite transitions, very simple but effective, where Strahm walks into the room with a pendulum trap happened. As for performances in this film, Strahm absolutely kills it. According to commentary, he is quite a physical actor and gets into it, including unplanned parts like him flipping that heavy bed. He also does a great job of adapting his voice after the tracheotomy, and in the final scene later, he sells the scene really well. For Hoffman, this performance is definitely his best. He's not a full-on smug, plot-armoured supervillain badass like they push him to be in Saw 6 and 7, though he's still blandly evil. He feels cold, calculated, but not invincible yet. He makes fuck-ups, and you see in his past that his fuck-ups are what led him to Jigsaw in the first place. Speaking of Jigsaw, the scene where they kidnap Hoffman is pretty good. It's done to show how Hoffman began and to give a sympathetic backstory. His sister got essayed and murdered, and he mimicked a Jigsaw track to kill her murderer. Jigsaw believes murder is wrong, sure bud, but offers to show Hoffman their ways and philosophy. So basically the idea of Saw 4, but actually commits to the idea. I wish this characterization of Hoffman was kept throughout the films, but this is the only film where I like Hoffman. Another huge positive is that ending. It's again quite simple, but the trap at the end is fantastic. And the way Hoffman lures him out not only to get rid of Strahm, but to actually frame him. Jesus, Peter. It's a pretty good idea. It also leads really well into Saw 6 and sets a great scene for that film. Now for the traps. The water cube is my favourite trap. The fact they actually had the actor hold his breath and do it for real was impressive. The way out was really clever. Second best trap was the previously mentioned glass coffin trap. Really excellently done.
He started doing a cast of my arms, and I said, well, you know, what are you doing a cast of my arms for? He goes, oh, they didn't tell you, they're killing you off.
They crawled into the glass box, and the entire room filled with water, and Strahm eventually drowned. We felt that it was just too hard for us to shoot. So we were sitting around one day, and Dan Hefner said, what about the crushing walls idea? And they can play all the same beats that was originally written into the script, and the box goes down, and as the box settles into the floor, the walls come across it. Hoffman's safe in the box, Strahm can't escape any way but up. And it just all seemed to work so beautifully that we fell in love more with the crushing walls than the drowning.
Worst is kind of hard as there's no bad ones, but the nail bomb jaw trap is the most obvious of how everyone could have survived. So there's that. Hey everyone, Filling the Void here. Thank you so much for making it through the first half of this project. For the second half, I'm hoping to have it out around March or April-ish. Depends on, external circumstances or any difficulties in the editing process. But yeah, thank you so much for making it this far, because I understand that the first half has been a lot more negative than the second half will be. But please understand that some of my negatives are hyperbolic for the sake of comedic effect, and that I really love this series. Other than the bottom two films, I could enjoy any of these if I just put them on and have a good time. So yeah, I'm gonna do some stuff in between part 1 and part 2, but nothing too editing heavy, I believe. Gotta be like some music stuff, some game stuff, or whatever I feel like, really. So if you want to see whatever comes out of me next, yeah, please feel free to stick around, and hopefully see you for part 2. I mean, if you're one of the like 5 or 10 people who have made it this far through the video, I appreciate it, because this has turned out very long. I spent like dozens of hours on the whole process of making this project, so yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, this video was definitely meant to be done, you know, now, not when Saw X was nearly released or Halloween. Now, everyone knows Christmas is the most topical time of year to talk about Saw, right? I mean, it's still Halloween.
Yes, it's Halloween, yes, it's Halloween. This video wasn't finished late. Yes, it's Halloween, yes, it's really Halloween. Please don't look at the date. La la la, la la la.
Especially the horrible beatdown of Jill by Gordon. By Gordon? What the fuck? That's not the character. Gordon wouldn't do that, he's a good boy. Even if he's an apprentice, he's still a good boy.